En la negra Martina que brinca por los palacios cayó dentro de una olla de bandazo entre las mallas. De bandazo va ella, de bandazo anda ella, de bandazo. Ay, que de bandazo, la negra Martina cayó en la malla, de bandazo va ella, de bandazo anda.
About 1,700 years ago, the Taino, a subgroup of the Arawakan Indians, traveled on canoas from the Orinoco Amazon region of South America to Venezuela and the Caribbean islands. They went to Jamaica, the Bahamas, Cuba, the Dominican Republic, and Puerto Rico. The Tainos that came to Puerto Rico quickly settled into their new homes. They had a society that was organized into 3 levels: the Ni Tainos, or nobility, the Bohiques, or medicine men, and the Naborias, or farmers. Each town, or Yucayeque, was led by a cacique, or chief. Women, along with men, were able to become caciques and go to war. When Christopher Columbus arrived in Puerto Rico in November of 1493, they identified themselves as the Taino, which means good ones in their Arawak language, to distinguish themselves from the Caribs, who, despite the Taínos' peaceful and non-aggressive nature, were constantly at war and losing territory to them. The Taino named the island Boriqueng, meaning the land of the brave lord. After discovering vast amounts of gold in the region's rivers and mines, the name was changed to Puerto Rico, meaning rich port. When the capital city was established, it took the name of San Juan. Racial attitudes were pretty fluid during the start of the Spanish colonialism, which allowed for intermarriage between racial groupings. The historical presence and integration of free blacks in Spain contributed to a more accepting race attitude when compared to Northern European colonists. As a result, a number of free black people joined the Spanish expeditions. One such person was Juan Garrido, a free Spanish citizen from Seville, who helped the indigenous people advance in agriculture. Another was Pedro Mejias, a free mulatto who was rumored to have married a Taino chief named Luisa. Their marriage symbolizes the blending of Spanish, African, and Taino bloodlines, foundational to Puerto Rico's demographic. The transition from a gold-to-sugar economy was necessary due to gold depletion, and the impending extinction of Taínos led to the biggest migration in recorded history, the Negro slave trade. In order to fulfill this need for inexpensive labor, Frere Bartolomé de las Casas, known for championing the Indians' plight, proposed using blacks instead of Indian labor. When Spanish colonists protested about losing their labor force, de las Casas believed black slavery was the natural state for Africans. In 1517, he advocated for immigration to the New World, allowing Spaniards to import 12 Negroes each, formally opening the slave trade to the New World. African slaves from the Yoruba and Bantu tribes had the most significant impact on Puerto Rican culture. Despite attempts to convert slaves to Christianity, African religious practices continue to create a distinct cultural identity in Puerto Rico through its language, culture, and technology as African slaves assimilated into Spanish society. Even now, Christian saints and African gods are frequently shown together in Puerto Rican homes, with sacrifices made to each. During the early years of the colony, European and African soldiers, settlers, farmers, and enslaved laborers arrived without women, marrying into Taino indigenous population, resulting in a mixture of ethnic groups, known as mulattos, or mestizos. The Royal Decree of Graces in 1815 provided free land to attract new settlers, which encouraged slave labor to revive agriculture. By 1835, the actual importation of slaves to Puerto Rico had ceased. However, around this time, the Spanish crown imposed El Bando contra la Raza Africana, the proclamation against the African race, a series of cruel laws to control the behavior of Puerto Ricans of African descent. Out of fear after the Haitian Revolution of 1810. Laws known as the Regla del Sacar, or Gracias al Sacar laws, allowed people of African ancestry to be considered legally white if they could prove that at least one person in the last 4 generations had been legally white. This period played a large part in why later Puerto Ricans strayed away from identifying as black or acknowledging the high percentage of African ancestry, along with condemning having a dark skin color or more textured hair. These laws, along with the influx of settlers, led to an increase in cruelty towards slaves, resulting in a series of slave uprisings from the early 1820s to 1868. Around 1860, the push for political independence was also gaining more traction. The free native population is increasingly identified as Puerto Rican rather than Spanish. In 1873, a bill known as the Ley Moret was passed, finally abolishing slavery in Puerto Rico. After gaining independence in 1897 and losing the Spanish-American War in 1898, Puerto Rico was given over to the United States because Afro-Puerto Rican leaders like Pedro Albizu Campos and José Celso Barbosa spearheaded the independence struggle. It was firmly anchored in anti-slavery beliefs, as well as the need for recognition and dignity as people of color. In 1917, Puerto Ricans were finally awarded citizenship. However, sociological research starting in the 1950s revealed that Afro-Puerto Ricans are overrepresented in impoverished metropolitan areas, low-wage jobs, and prison facilities. They are also affected by long-standing racist prejudices against black people that are deeply embedded in Puerto Rican society and are routinely engaged in but rarely acknowledged. For example, profiling and stereotyping in Puerto Rico often identify Dominicans as predominantly black and mulatto illegal foreigners, leading to police mistakenly arresting Afro-Puerto Ricans who are without identification. So why is it that while African ancestry is reflected in the island's literature, politics, and scientific institutions, as well as in Puerto Rico's art, music, cuisine, religious beliefs, and everyday life, it is still viewed as being the most socially undesirable of the three and accorded the lowest status? We decided to interview some people who identify as Puerto Ricans to not only get their perspective on interaction and influence of their ancestry, but specifically their ideas, knowledge, and feelings about their African heritage and the colorism towards darker-skinned Puerto Ricans, leading to institutionalized racism.
What's your name and age?
I'm Rosa Lavoy, 51.
Do you feel that there's racism in Puerto Rico towards other Puerto Ricans?
Yes, there's definitely a difference between the light skin and the dark skin. Sometimes with economical status also, and education, but definitely racism. There is, yes.
Do you know the Taino effect on Puerto Ricans?
Well, they did a DNA test, and they find out that a lot of Puerto Ricans do carry the DNA from the Tainos, and we also kept a lot of the words and food and a lot of customs from them too. We did took a lot of things from them. We still have it for today, like the town names and stuff like that. They do have a lot of things, the Tainos.
Do you feel that there's a strong difference between Puerto Ricans and African Americans?
Other than the language, no, not much. Maybe just the language.
What were some things that you were told as a child relating to being black or speaking to another dark-skinned person?
That we was disadvantaged in a way.
Why?
Because it was racism and jobs and opportunities that we didn't have the same opportunities like everybody else did.
Do you feel like colorism in Puerto Rico towards dark-skinned Puerto Ricans is a lasting result of how the colonizers made Puerto Ricans feel towards Africans?
Absolutely, yeah, I believe so. It has everything to do with it.
How do you feel about the colonial side of Puerto Rico?
You could see it more now after the hurricane, that a lot of Puerto Ricans didn't have houses and other things, that they had to kind of leave the island, and they definitely colonized in Puerto Rico. It's not like it used to be. Every the properties that you go and see now, is owned by a white person, for sure. They taken the island.
What are your thoughts on racism between the Puerto Ricans and the states and the islanders?
I think it's ignorance. Ignorance, period. Ignorance.
Are there any personal experiences that you experienced being Puerto Rican?
I have experienced racism amongst Hispanic mostly than from white people. It's against country with country. Sometimes it's always racism everywhere, in every form and every way that they could possibly. It's just real sad.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good.
You're good? What's your name and your age?
Ashley Chevalier, and I'm 29 years old.
Okay. I'm going to ask you some questions about Puerto Rico and what it is being Puerto Rican. Do you feel like there's racism in Puerto Rico towards other Puerto Ricans?
Yeah, absolutely. You have the black Puerto Ricans, and then you have the white Puerto Ricans, and then you have everyone in the middle. And it's usually from both sides, mostly from the white Puerto Ricans. Well, I want to backtrack that. Hold on. At least in my experience, it comes from the black Puerto Ricans because they feel like the white Puerto Ricans are not Hispanic enough or they're not Puerto Rican enough. Therefore, they look too gringo, as some would say. There's definitely racism amongst that community.
Do you know about the Taino effect on Puerto Ricans?
In general, from what I've learned, yes, I know that there's a reserve in Puerto Rico. I don't remember where, but it's basically you have to prove that you're part Taino or that you have lineage in Taino ancestry. I know that portion.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a little bit much, considering that especially people that come straight from the island could most likely be 100% Taino, and I think there is a little bit of Taino in every one of us, especially when it comes from Dominican Republic, Cuba, parts of Nicaragua, things like that. It's kind of really hard to, I guess, get a DNA test for that, or get into genealogy when it comes to that. I think it's a little bit tricky because it kind of stems along the lines of how natives and how they have to identify their people and what's considered. And I don't even know the percentage of Taino that you have to be in order to be in that reserve. So that's another topic that's kind of has me a little nervous.
Do you feel there's a strong difference between Puerto Ricans and African Americans? And if so,
Strong
why?
difference?
Yeah, if so, why?
Not a huge difference. I think the only difference is really the continent and where we are. You have Puerto Ricans that come from a very small island, and then you have Africans that come from an entire continent. That they have more culture and more diversity and they have more things going on. Puerto Ricans, it's kind of limited and a little bit smaller. I think we derive a lot of their culture into our culture and we made it our own. But in terms of like a difference, I don't think there's like a huge difference.
What were some things that you were told as a child relating to being black or speaking to another dark-skinned person?
What's funny is that growing up, I wasn't in either party, so I was too black to be with the white kids, and I was too white to be with the black kids. And in high school, I was too black to be with the South American kids. So to me, it's kind of hard to form an opinion when you really never had a place to begin with growing up. So I don't have any harsh opinions. I really don't have an opinion on it.
So do you feel like colorism in Puerto Rico towards dark-skinned Puerto Ricans is a lasting result of how the colonizers made Puerto Ricans feel towards Africans?
Yeah. And even towards the white Puerto Ricans, because they never asked to be here either.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's kind of on both sides. I feel like it's more effective on the black Puerto Ricans than on the white Puerto Ricans because they're more acceptable as opposed to the black Puerto Ricans that are like, it can go if you're African, you're black, or you're Latino. It's really crucial. How do I feel? You're African, you're black, or you're... How do I feel about the colonial side of Puerto Rico? Puerto Rico refuses help from the United States, which is rightfully so because I feel like the United States, everything they touch just turns to absolute dog shit. And, you know, they have every right to basically deny help. However, the island is basically sinking. There's more homelessness than ever. And the gringos are coming in and they're buying up all the land and kicking out the residents. So it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't. And it's hard because I feel for the island, and at the same time it's like I was born here, so it's hard to connect deeply with the island, and it makes me sad that I don't feel that connection, at least from my experience.
Do you feel that there's a strong difference between Puerto Ricans and African Americans?
No, I think we're all the same. No difference.
What were some things that you were told as a child relating to being black or speaking to another dark-skinned person?
Well, living in New York City, black people always had this reputation of stealing, killing, fighting, doing bad stuff. That's
the black, and you feeling some type of way about that side of you, like because of the features, like, oh, you don't want that big nose, or you don't want that hair. That's still stem. Like, the main reason they tell you not to date them is like, oh, you know how they got that hair, don't date them because of that kinky hair. Over there, boys would not date me when I was growing up, and because of the way I look. So I barely even went into dates because they will make fun of, like, oh, no, you're too dark skinned. Imagine I have a kid with you, then my kid got your hair or something. And no. So